The air in the assembly chamber was electric with tension. Rows of engineers, scientists, and military officials filled the tiered seating, their faces illuminated by the glowing projection of the Empire's latest creation, the Dominion Core. At the center of the vast room, a hologram spun slowly, its intricate design showcasing a weapon of unparalleled power. General Calyx, clad in the imposing black armor of the Empire's elite, strode to the podium. His voice boomed through the chamber, a mix of pride and menace. The Dominion Core is the culmination of our greatest minds and resources. With it, we will end this war and bring the galaxy to its knees. The audience erupted into applause, but not everyone in the room shared the sentiment. Among the sea of stoic faces, a group of human engineers exchanged furtive glances. At the forefront was Dr. Mira Solon, her sharp features betraying none of the turmoil roiling inside her. She had worked on the Dominion Core for months, a position granted to her not out of trust, but necessity. The Empire had enslaved humanity years ago, forcing its brightest minds into service. Mira had no illusions about her situation. As the presentation continued, Myra's mind raced. The Dominion Core was a weapon of catastrophic potential, capable of unleashing energy waves that could annihilate entire fleets in seconds. If the Empire deployed it, the Resistance, already hanging by a thread, would be wiped out. She couldn't let that happen. That night, under the guise of reviewing schematics, Mira met with her fellow engineers in a dimly lit workshop. Among them were Liam Torin, a former Resistance fighter turned tech specialist, and Kira Valtiz, a communications expert who had secretly funneled intel to Resistance cells for years. The core's activation test is scheduled for next week. Mira began, her voice low. If we're going to act, it has to be now. Liam leaned forward, his rugged face etched with determination. What's the plan? Sabotage the test? Mira shook her head. No, if we simply disable it, they'll rebuild it. We need to make the Empire believe the Dominion Core is a failure, a liability they can't afford to use. Kira's brow furrowed. How do we do that without getting caught? Mira hesitated, then pulled up a schematic on her datapad. We reprogram the core's failsafe protocols. When they activate it, it will backfire spectacularly. But to make it convincing, we'll need to simulate an external attack, something that can't be traced back to us. The room fell silent as the weight of the plan sank in. Finally, Liam spoke. If this works, it'll buy the Resistance time to regroup and maybe even turn the tide. I'm in. Me too, Kira added, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. But we'll need to be careful. If they catch wind of this, she didn't need to finish the sentence. For the next several days, the team worked tirelessly, navigating the fine line between sabotage and survival. Mira embedded a subroutine in the core's operating system, ensuring that when the weapon activated, its energy would cascade back into its power grid, causing a catastrophic overload. Liam rigged a series of secondary malfunctions to create the illusion of a coordinated attack, while Kira manipulated the communication relays to mask their activities. The night before the activation test, Mira stood alone in the workshop, staring at the schematics one last time. The enormity of their plan weighed heavily on her. Failure wasn't just an option. It was a death sentence for her, her team, and countless lives depending on the Resistance's survival. You've checked it 100 times, Liam said, entering the room. His voice was soft, a rare moment of reassurance. It'll work. Mira nodded, her resolve hardening. It has to. The following day, the Dominion Core was transported to the Imperial Testing Grounds, a sprawling facility on the barren moon of Xyraxis. Mira and her team were stationed in the control room, surrounded by Empire loyalists who monitored the weapon's every function. Initiating power-up sequence, an officer announced, his voice clipped and efficient. Myra's heart raced as the core's energy field began to hum, its glow intensifying with each passing second. The room was tense, every pair of eyes fixed on the monitors displaying the core's status. Energy levels stabilizing, another officer reported. Output at 87% and climbing. Liam, seated across the room, gave Mira a barely perceptible nod. The failsafe subroutine was in place. All they had to do now was wait. Output at 100%, the officer continued, preparing to fire test pulse. Mira gripped the edge of her console, her knuckles white. The room fell silent as the core emitted a low, resonant hum, its energy coalescing into a sphere of blinding light. Then chaos. The core shuddered violently, its glow turning from brilliant white to an ominous red. Alarms blared as the monitors displayed a cascade of error messages. The energy sphere collapsed inward, sending shockwaves through the facility. Sparks erupted from the control panels, and a deafening roar filled the air as the core's containment field failed. Abort the test, General Calyx bellowed, his voice cutting through the panic. Shut it down. But it was too late. The Dominion Core's catastrophic failure rippled across the facility like a stone dropped into still water. Walls buckled, equipment Equipment sparked and exploded, and personnel scrambled for cover. Mira and her team remained frozen in place, feigning the same shock and confusion as everyone else. "This shouldn't be happening," one of the Empire's technicians shouted over the din, his voice trembling with fear. The systems were flawless. General Calyx, his face a mask of fury, barked orders into his communicator. "Seal the facility. No one leaves until we determine the cause of this disaster." Mira exchanged a quick glance with Liam and Kira. They knew their window to escape was closing fast. They couldn't let themselves fall under suspicion. Not now, when their sabotage had only just begun to take effect. "Follow my lead," Mira whispered, her voice barely audible over the chaos. She pulled up a diagnostic display on her console, pretending to analyze the core's data. "It's an energy feedback loop," she announced loudly enough for those nearby to hear. "The containment field collapsed, but the cause isn't clear." Calyx's sharp gaze locked onto her. "Can you stabilize it?" Mira hesitated just long enough to appear uncertain. "Not without shutting down the entire power grid. It's too dangerous to attempt a repair while the system is active." "Do it," Calyx ordered, his tone leaving no room for argument. "And I want a full report on my desk within the hour." Mira nodded, her heart pounding. This was their chance to cover their tracks. As the core systems were powered down, she subtly purged the subroutine logs that could link the sabotage to her team. Meanwhile, Kira accessed the facility's communication hub, planting a false transmission that suggested the failure was the result of a cyber attack by the Resistance. It was a risky move, but it bought them plausible deniability. By the time the facility's security teams conducted their initial sweep, Mira and her team were back in their quarters, their expressions carefully neutral. The guards interrogated everyone, but their ruse held. No evidence pointed to them, and the staged transmission added weight to their cover story. The aftermath of the disaster was swift and brutal. The Empire, convinced the Resistance had found a way to infiltrate their systems, launched a campaign of retaliatory strikes across occupied territories. Civilians were rounded up, resources seized, and Resistance cells attacked with overwhelming force. But the chaos within the Empire's ranks was undeniable. The Dominion Core had been their trump card, a symbol of their technological superiority. Its failure shook their confidence and sowed mistrust among their leadership. In the days that followed, Mira and her team worked in the shadows, feeding carefully crafted misinformation to the Resistance. They knew the Empire would eventually attempt to rebuild the core, and they needed to be ready to strike again when the time came. One evening, as they gathered in a secure section of the facility, Liam voiced the question that had been gnawing at all of them. "How long can we keep this up? The Empire's not stupid. They'll figure out it wasn't a Resistance attack eventually." Myra's expression was grim. "That's why we need to stay ahead of them. The Resistance needs time to regroup, and every day we delay the core's reconstruction is a victory." Kira frowned. "But what if they start looking too closely at us? We're already under more scrutiny than ever." Mira placed a hand on her shoulder. "We'll be careful, but we can't stop now. This is bigger than us." Their resolve was tested when an Imperial investigator arrived at the facility. Colonel Arden was infamous for his ruthless efficiency, and his arrival sent a ripple of fear through the personnel. Within hours, he had ordered audits of all systems and interrogated half the engineering staff. Mira and her team knew their cover was paper-thin. They redoubled their efforts to erase any trace of their involvement, but the pressure was immense. Every interaction with Arden felt like a tightrope walk over a pit of vipers. The turning point came when Arden uncovered an anomaly in the core's backup systems, an oversight Mira had missed in her haste to purge the logs. The discovery led directly to her workstation, and she was summoned to a private meeting with the colonel. As she entered his office, her pulse raced. Arden sat behind a sleek metal desk, his piercing eyes studying her like a predator sizing up its prey. "Dr. Solon," he began, his voice cold and measured. "Explain this." He gestured to a holographic display showing the anomaly. Mira took a deep breath, her mind racing. "It's an error in the redundancy protocols," she said, feigning uncertainty. "The feedback loop likely triggered it. I didn't catch it during the initial review." Arden leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. "Convenient, but not impossible." He paused, his gaze boring into her. "I'll be watching you closely, Doctor." Mira nodded, her face a mask of professionalism. "Understood, Colonel." As she left the office, her legs felt like lead. She had bought herself some time, but the noose was tightening. Back in the workshop, Liam and Kira waited anxiously for her return. "How bad is it?" Liam asked. "Bad," Mira admitted. "Arden suspects something, but he doesn't have proof yet. We need to be even more careful from now on." The days that followed were a delicate balancing act. The team continued their sabotage efforts, but the constant surveillance made every move a gamble. They knew the stakes had never been higher, but their mission was too important to abandon. As tensions mounted, Mira found herself haunted by the faces of those who had already suffered under the Empire's wrath. She swore to herself that their sacrifices would not be in vain. The Dominion Corps' destruction had been only the beginning. The Empire's leadership was in turmoil. Reports of the Dominion Corps' failure reached the highest echelons, and with it came a storm of blame and suspicion. General Calyx found himself under scrutiny, his reputation tarnished by the weapon's catastrophic debut. Desperate to salvage his standing, he accelerated plans to rebuild the Corps and root out the supposed resistance saboteurs. Colonel Arden seized the opportunity to expand his investigation. His sharp intellect and unrelenting pursuit of answers sent shockwaves through the facility. Engineers and scientists were subjected to grueling interrogations, their every action scrutinized. Surveillance intensified, with security drones patrolling every corridor and cameras monitoring every workstation. Mira and her team worked under constant pressure, their every move a calculated risk. They knew their cover could be blown at any moment, but they also knew the stakes were too high to stop. If the Dominion Corps was rebuilt, the resistance would face annihilation. One evening, as Mira reviewed schematics in her quarters, her communicator buzzed with a secure transmission. It was Kira, her voice low and urgent. "We've got a problem. Arden's ordered a full audit of the backup systems. He's bound to find the subroutine you implanted." Myra's stomach tightened. "How much time do we have?" "Not much," Kira replied. "They're starting the audit tomorrow." Myra's mind raced. The subroutine was the key to their sabotage. It had to remain hidden. "Meet me in the workshop in an hour," she said. "We'll figure this out." The team convened under the guise of routine maintenance. Mira outlined a risky plan to overwrite the subroutine during the audit, masking it as a standard update. It required perfect timing and precision, but it was their only option. The next day, as the audit began, Mira and Kira worked side by side at a console in the server room. Arden's presence loomed over them, his sharp eyes watching their every move. Myra's hands moved deftly across the interface, her voice steady as she explained the fabricated update to the Colonel. Kira, seated at a secondary console, monitored the progress of the overwrite. Her heart pounded as the subroutine's code was replaced line by line, each second feeling like an eternity. "Update complete," Mira announced, her voice calm despite the tension in her chest. She stepped back from the console, meeting Arden's gaze. "The system is clean." Arden studied her for a long moment before nodding. "For your sake, Doctor, I hope you're right." As he left the room, Kira let out a shaky breath. "That was too close." Mira nodded, her expression grim. "We're running out of time. We need to finish this before Arden digs any deeper." The team's next move was their boldest yet. Using the Empire's own communication network, they transmitted a series of false resistance signals, drawing attention away from the facility. At the same time, they sabotaged critical components of the Dominion Corps' reconstruction, ensuring further delays and complications. The Empire's response was swift and brutal. Entire fleets were dispatched to chase the phantom signals, spreading their forces thin. The delays in the Corps' progress sowed frustration and dissent among the leadership, further fracturing their unity. But the team's actions came at a cost. Arden grew increasingly suspicious, his focus narrowing on Mira and her colleagues. One night, as Mira returned to her quarters, she found her door unlocked. Inside, her belongings were in disarray, a clear sign that someone had searched her room. Her communicator buzzed with a message from Liam. "They're onto us. We need to move." Myra's heart sank. The team's sabotage had pushed the Empire to the brink, but now they were in greater danger than ever. They couldn't afford to stay at the facility any longer. It was time to make their escape. Under the cover of darkness, the team gathered in the workshop. Liam had managed to secure access to a small cargo shuttle, its flight logs erased to avoid detection. As they prepared to leave, Mira felt a pang of guilt. They were abandoning the facility and the people they had worked alongside, many of whom would face the Empire's wrath in their absence. "Are we ready?" Liam asked, his voice tense. Mira nodded. "Let's go." The escape was harrowing. Security patrols were everywhere, and the slightest misstep could expose them. Kira worked furiously to disable the facility's perimeter alarms, while Liam piloted the shuttle with precision. Mira and the others held their breath as the shuttle passed through the outer defenses, every second feeling like a lifetime. When they finally cleared the facility's airspace, a sense of relief washed over them. But the danger was far from over. The Empire would stop at nothing to hunt them down, and their mission was far from complete. As the shuttle entered hyperspace, Mira turned to her team. "We've bought the resistance time, but it's not enough. We need to take what we've learned and finish this." Liam nodded, his expression resolute. "Then let's make sure the Empire regrets ever building that weapon." The team's escape marked the beginning of a new chapter chapter in their fight against the Empire. With the Dominion Corps delayed and the Empire's forces spread thin, the Resistance had a chance to strike back. But for Mira and her team, the journey ahead would be their greatest test yet. The shuttle carrying Mira and her team emerged from hyperspace at a hidden Resistance base tucked away in the asteroid belt of the Varney system. The base was a hub of activity, with ships being repaired, supplies organized, and operatives planning their next moves. It was a stark contrast to the sterile, oppressive environment of the Imperial facility. Commander Rael Torin, a grizzled veteran of countless battles, greeted the team as they disembarked. His piercing gaze assessed each of them, lingering on Mira. "You've made it out alive. That's more than I can say for most who've tangled with the Empire." "We didn't just tangle," Liam said, his voice carrying a note of pride. "We left them in shambles." Rael raised an eyebrow, a hint of a smile breaking through his stern demeanor. "Good. We need every advantage we can get." The team briefed Rael and his advisors on the sabotage and the intelligence they had gathered during their time at the facility. The Resistance's analysts pored over the data, identifying weaknesses in the Empire's infrastructure and opportunities to strike. "This changes everything," Rael said, his tone grim but hopeful. "If we can coordinate our efforts, we can hit them where it hurts and keep them off balance." Mira and her team quickly found themselves at the center of the Resistance's plans. Their first-hand knowledge of the Dominion Corps and the Empire's operations made them invaluable. But with their expertise came responsibility and danger. The Resistance's first target was an Imperial supply depot critical to the Corps' reconstruction. Myra's team led the mission, using their insider knowledge to infiltrate the facility and plant explosives on key infrastructure. The operation was a success, with the depot reduced to rubble and the Empire's logistics disrupted. Each victory emboldened the Resistance and inspired oppressed worlds to join the fight. But the Empire was not idle. They tightened their grip on occupied territories, unleashing a wave of crackdowns that left countless civilians suffering. Mira struggled with the cost of their actions. For every step forward the Resistance took, the Empire retaliated with brutal efficiency. Yet, she knew the fight was necessary. The alternative, a galaxy forever under the Empire's iron rule, was unthinkable. As the Resistance's campaign gained momentum, Myra's team turned their focus back to the Dominion Corps. The Empire had relocated the weapons remnants to a heavily fortified installation on the volcanic world of their axis. The installation was a fortress, surrounded by treacherous terrain and guarded by an elite division of Imperial forces. The mission to their axis was the most dangerous yet. The Resistance fleet provided a distraction, engaging the Empire's forces in orbit while Myra's team infiltrated the installation. The approach was harrowing, with the shuttle navigating through volcanic plumes and intense heat. Inside the installation, the team moved with precision, disabling security systems and evading patrols. Mira led them to the Corps' storage chamber, where the weapons components were being repaired and tested. The sight of the Dominion Corps, even in its incomplete state, sent a chill down her spine. "This is it," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "We destroy this, and they'll never rebuild it." Liam and Kira set charges on the Corps' power conduits while Arun worked to extract the remaining data from the facility's servers. As they worked, alarms blared, and the sound of approaching boots echoed through the corridors. "They know we're here," Kira said, her voice tense. "Then we finish this now," Mira replied. "Liam, Kira, with me. Arun, get that data and meet us at the extraction point." The team split up, with Mira leading a defensive stand to hold off the Imperial soldiers. The battle was fierce, the heat from the volcanic vents adding to the chaos. But the team held their ground, their determination outweighing their fear. When the charges detonated, the Dominion Corps was consumed in a massive explosion, its components reduced to molten slag. The facility shook violently, and Myra's team raced to the extraction point as the installation began to collapse. The shuttle lifted off just as the ground beneath it crumbled, the intense heat scorching its hull. Mara, piloting with her usual skill, guided them through the chaotic atmosphere and back to the Resistance fleet. The destruction of the Dominion Corps was a turning point in the war. The Empire's plans for domination were shattered, and their resources stretched to the breaking point. The Resistance seized the opportunity to push further, liberating key systems and rallying the galaxy against their oppressors. But for Mira and her team, the victory was bittersweet. The cost had been immense, and the scars of their journey would never fully heal. Yet, as they stood together aboard the Resistance flagship, they knew they had made a difference. Rael approached them, his expression solemn but proud. "You've done more than anyone could have asked. The galaxy owes you a debt it can never repay." Mira shook her head. "We didn't do it for recognition. We did it because someone had to." The team's journey was far from over. The Empire, though weakened, was still a formidable foe. But for the first time, the Resistance had the upper hand, land and a chance to forge a future free from tyranny. As the stars stretched out before them, Mira allowed herself a moment of hope. The fight was not yet won, but the spark they had ignited would light the way for generations to come. News of the Dominion Corps' destruction spread across the galaxy like wildfire. For many, it was the first sign that the Empire could be defeated. Resistance cells, long isolated and demoralized, began to unite under a common banner. Civilian uprisings erupted on occupied worlds, and Imperial garrisons found themselves outnumbered and overwhelmed. But the Empire was far from defeated. The Supreme Command convened an emergency council, its remaining leaders scrambling to regain control. Amid the chaos, whispers of betrayal and incompetence sowed division among them. General Calix, humiliated by the failure of the Dominion Corps, found himself sidelined, his authority eroded. Colonel Arden, however, emerged as a rising force within the Empire. His relentless pursuit of the saboteurs who had infiltrated the Corps' development made him a figure of fear and respect. Determined to restore the Empire's dominance, he spearheaded a campaign to crush the Resistance once and for all. The Resistance, aware of the Empire's desperation, moved quickly to capitalize on its advantage. Mira and her team became instrumental in coordinating strikes against key Imperial installations, their knowledge of the Empire's inner workings proving invaluable. One such mission took them to the industrial world of Calvaris, a planet that supplied the Empire's fleets with weapons and ammunition. The Resistance's goal was to disable the planet's primary manufacturing hub, crippling the Empire's ability to replenish its arsenal. The mission was fraught with danger. Calvaris was a fortress world, its factories protected by layers of defenses and a fleet of Imperial warships. The Resistance deployed its most skilled operatives, including Myra's team, to carry out the operation. As their ship approached Calvaris, Mira addressed her team in the cramped confines of the cargo bay. "This won't be like their Axis," she said. "We're not here to destroy, we're here to disrupt. Our goal is to shut down their production lines and create chaos." Liam nodded, his expression serious. "What about resistance on the ground?" "There will be plenty," Mira replied, "but we're not engaging unless we have to. Stick to the plan and we'll make it out alive." The team infiltrated the manufacturing hub under the cover of darkness, using stolen Imperial credentials to bypass the first layer of security. Once inside, they moved quickly, planting devices to overload the factory's power grid. The operation was going smoothly until an unexpected patrol discovered their presence. The team's cover was blown, and alarms blared throughout the facility. "Move! Move!" Mira shouted as Imperial soldiers poured into the factory. The team split up, each member tasked with completing their part of the mission despite the escalating chaos. Kira, working from a control room, hacked into the factory systems, disabling automated defenses and triggering a series of malfunctions. Liam and Arun fought off pursuing soldiers, buying Mira time to place the final charges on the main reactor. As the factory systems spiraled into disarray, the team regrouped at their extraction point. The charges detonated as they lifted off, sending plumes of smoke and fire into the air. The manufacturing hub was crippled, its production lines reduced to scrap. The victory was a major blow to the Empire, but it came at a cost. During their escape, Arun was injured, his leg grazed by a blaster bolt. Despite the pain, he insisted on continuing to fight, his determination unwavering. Back at the Resistance base, Mira reflected on the mission's success and the challenges that lay ahead. The Resistance was gaining ground, but each victory brought new risks. The Empire's retaliation was growing more ruthless, and the danger to her team was increasing with every mission. Rael, the Resistance commander, called Mira to his office one evening. His face was lined with exhaustion, but his eyes held a glimmer of hope. "We've made more progress in the past month than we have in years," he said. "But the Empire won't go down without a fight." Mira nodded. "They're desperate. That makes them dangerous, which is why we need to keep the pressure on," Rael said. "We've identified a target that could turn the tide completely. The Empire's central command hub on Vorin Station. It's where they coordinate their fleet movements and supply chains. Take it out, and the Empire will be blind." The mission to Vorin Station was the most ambitious yet. The Resistance fleet would launch a full-scale assault, drawing the Empire's defenses away from the station while Myra's team infiltrated its command center. As the fleet prepared for the attack, Mira gathered her team for a final briefing. The weight of the mission was palpable, but so was their resolve. "This is it," she said. "If we succeed, we'll cripple the Empire's ability to fight. But it's going to take everything we've got." Liam grinned, his confidence unshaken. "We've come this far. What's a little more chaos?" Kira chuckled, but her smile faded as she looked at Mira. "Just promise me we'll all make it back." Mira hesitated, then nodded. "I'll do everything I can." The Resistance fleet launched its assault with precision, precision, engaging the Empire's forces in a battle that lit up the void. Myra's team, aboard a stealth ship, slipped past the chaos and docked at Vorin Station. Inside the station, the team moved with purpose, their years of experience guiding them through its labyrinthine corridors. They encountered heavy resistance, but their training and teamwork saw them through. When they reached the command center, Mira and Kira worked together to disable the station systems while Liam and Arun held off the Imperial guards. The intensity of the fight pushed them to their limits, but they refused to back down. As the station systems collapsed, the Resistance fleet delivered the final blow, destroying its critical infrastructure. The mission was a success, and the Empire's command network was shattered. Back aboard the Resistance flagship, Mira and her team were hailed as heroes. But as they stood together, weary and scarred, they knew the fight was far from over. The Empire was wounded, but it was not yet defeated. Mira looked out at the stars, her thoughts turning to the countless lives that had been lost and the countless more that hung in the balance. The road ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear: the Resistance would fight until the galaxy was free. The destruction of Vorin Station sent shockwaves through the Empire. With their command hub in ruins, the coordination of their fleets and supply lines was thrown into disarray. The Resistance seized the opportunity, launching a series of coordinated strikes that liberated key systems and further eroded the Empire's control. But even as the Resistance gained ground, Mira knew the war was far from over. The Empire's supreme command, though fractured, still held immense power. Their final stronghold, a fortified citadel on the planet Erithos, was a bastion of their military might. If the Resistance could take Erithos, it would mark the end of the Empire's reign. The mission to Erithos was unlike anything the Resistance had attempted before. The citadel was protected by a planetary shield, a fleet of warships, and an army of elite soldiers. It was a near impossible task, but for Mira and her team, it was the culmination of everything they had fought for. As the Resistance fleet prepared for the assault, Mira gathered her team for one final briefing. The atmosphere was heavy with a mix of anticipation and trepidation. "This is it," Mira said, her voice steady despite the weight of the moment. "The Empire has thrown everything they have into defending Erithos. If we take it, we end this war. But we all know the risks." Liam crossed his arms, a confident grin on his face. "Risks are what we do best." Kira rolled her eyes but smiled. "Just don't get cocky. We've got a lot riding on this." Arun, his leg still healing from the wound he'd sustained on Calvaris, nodded solemnly. "We'll get it done. We have to." The Resistance fleet jumped into the Erithos system under the cover of a meteor storm, their ships blending with the natural debris to evade detection. The fleet's first objective was to disable the planetary shield, a task that required precision and bravery. Myra's team was assigned to infiltrate the shield generator on the planet's surface. Their stealth ship navigated through the storm, avoiding enemy patrols and anti-air defenses. When they reached the generator, the team moved swiftly, disabling security systems and planting explosives on critical components. The generator's destruction was a spectacle, the explosion lighting up the night sky and signaling the fleet to begin its assault. Resistance fighters descended on the citadel, engaging the Empire's forces in a battle that raged across the planet. Inside the citadel, Mira and her team pushed toward the command center, their path fraught with danger. Every corridor was a battleground, every corner a potential ambush. The team fought with everything they had, their resolve unshaken despite the odds. When they reached the command center, they were met by the Empire's supreme commander, a towering figure clad in armor that radiated menace. His voice was cold and mocking as he addressed them. "You think you've won? The Empire is eternal. You are nothing but a fleeting rebellion." Mira stepped forward, her weapon trained on the commander. "The Empire ends here." The battle that followed was brutal. The commander's armor made him nearly impervious to their attacks, and his strength was unmatched. But the team fought with a unity and determination that the Empire could not counter. Liam and Kira worked to disable the commander's armor, exploiting the weaknesses Mira had identified. Arun provided covering fire, his aim steady despite the chaos. Mira delivered the final blow, a precise shot that penetrated the armor's core and brought the commander to his knees. As the commander fell, the Resistance forces overwhelmed the remaining defenders. The citadel was taken, and the Empire's leadership was captured or killed. The war was over. The galaxy erupted in celebration as news of the victory spread. On liberated worlds, people poured into the streets, their joy and relief palpable. The Resistance fleet returned to its base, greeted as heroes by those they had fought to free. For Mira and her team, the victory was bittersweet. They had achieved what once seemed impossible. impossible, but the cost had been immense. Friends and allies had been lost, and the scars of the war would remain with them forever. In the days that followed, the resistance began the arduous task of rebuilding. Formerly occupied worlds worked to establish self-governance, and alliances formed to ensure the empire could never rise again. Mira and her team played a key role in these efforts, their experience and leadership invaluable. One evening, as Mira stood on a balcony overlooking the bustling activity of the Resistance's headquarters, Liam joined her. "Quite a view," he said, leaning against the railing. "Hard to believe we made it." Mira smiled faintly. "It still doesn't feel real, but we did it." Liam nodded, his expression thoughtful. "So what now? No more empire to fight, no more sabotage missions. Think you'll miss it?" Mira laughed softly. "Not even a little, but there's still so much to do. The galaxy needs more than victory, it needs healing." As the stars stretched out before them, Mira allowed herself a moment of quiet reflection. The fight was over, but the journey was just beginning. Together, they had shaped the future of the galaxy, proving that even in the darkest times, hope could prevail. Months after the fall of the Empire, the galaxy was a very different place. The vacuum left by the Empire's collapse was filled with new alliances, each striving to rebuild what had been lost. The Resistance transitioned from a military force to a coalition of leaders and visionaries, guiding the galaxy toward unity and prosperity. For Mira and her team, the transition was not easy. Their roles as saboteurs and fighters had defined them for so long that adjusting to a life of peace felt foreign. Yet, each of them found a way to contribute. Liam returned to his homeworld, helping to rebuild the infrastructure devastated by the Empire's occupation. His knack for engineering became a cornerstone of the planet's recovery, and his stories of the Resistance inspired a new generation. Kira, always adept at communication, joined the efforts to establish an interstellar council. Her ability to bridge divides and foster understanding made her a key figure in the new government's formation. Arun, despite his injuries, became a teacher. He dedicated himself to passing on the knowledge he had gained during the war, ensuring that future generations would understand the importance of resilience and unity. Mira, however, struggled to find her place. The weight of leadership and the memories of the war lingered, casting a shadow over her attempts to move forward. She spent her days traveling between worlds, mediating disputes and advising fledgling governments. But it wasn't until she visited a small village on the edge of the galaxy that she found clarity. The village had been among the first to rise up against the Empire after the Dominion Corps' destruction. Its people, once cowed by fear, now thrived in freedom. They greeted Mira with warmth and gratitude, their smiles a testament to the impact of her efforts. As she stood in the village square, watching children play and families rebuild, Mira felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. For the first time, she allowed herself to believe that the galaxy could truly heal. Back at the Resistance's former headquarters, a monument had been erected to honor those who had fought and fallen during the war. Mira and her team gathered there one final time, their bonds unbroken despite the paths they had chosen. The monument's inscription read, "In unity, we found strength. In hope, we found victory. In sacrifice, we found freedom." Mira traced the words with her fingers, her heart swelling with emotion. "We did this," she said, her voice steady. "All of us, together." Liam placed a hand on her shoulder. "And we'll keep doing it. Whatever the galaxy needs, we'll be there." As they stood together beneath the stars, the future stretched out before them, uncertain but full of promise. The war was over, but their journey was far from complete. They had proven that even the most oppressive forces could be overcome, and they vowed to carry that lesson forward. For Mira, the stars no longer seemed so far away. They were a reminder of everything they had fought for and everything they had yet to build. Years later, the galaxy had transformed into a tapestry of independent systems, each unique but bound by a shared history of struggle and triumph. The scars of the Empire's reign remained, but so did the lessons learned from its fall. Mira had settled on a quiet moon orbiting a blue gas giant, far from the bustle of politics and commerce. Her small home overlooked an endless expanse of forests, their verdant hues shifting with the planet's rotation. Here, she found solace in the simplicity of life, tending to her garden, walking under the starlit sky, and reflecting on the path that had brought her here. One evening, as she sat on her porch watching the twin moons rise, a familiar sound broke the stillness, the hum of a starship descending. Mira stood, her heart leaping at the sight of the sleek vessel landing in the clearing nearby. Liam emerged first, his grin as wide as ever. "Thought you could hide from us forever," he called, his voice full of humor. Kira and Arun followed, their faces lighting up at the sight of Mira. It had been years since the team had last been together, each absorbed in their own endeavors. But as they embraced and exchanged stories, it was as if no time had passed. "We've been talking," Kira said, her tone serious but hopeful, "about what comes next. The galaxy's in a better place, but there's still so much work to be done." Liam nodded, "And we figured who better to help guide it than us. We've got the experience. And let's be honest, we work best as a team." Mira looked at them, her heart swelling with a mix of emotions. She had thought her part in the galaxy's story was over, but now, faced with the people who had shared her greatest triumphs and deepest losses, she realized there was still more to do. "One last adventure?" she asked, a smile tugging at her lips. Kira laughed. "Let's not limit ourselves. Who knows what we'll find out there?" As they boarded the ship, Mira felt a renewed sense of purpose. The stars stretched out before them, a reminder of both the battles they had fought and the possibilities that lay ahead. Together, they had defied the odds, dismantled an empire, and ignited a flame of hope that would burn for generations. Now, they were ready to take the next step, to forge new paths and ensure that the galaxy they had freed would remain a beacon of resilience and unity. As the ship lifted off, Mira looked out at the vast expanse of space, her heart light and her spirit unbroken. The journey was far from over, but that was exactly how she wanted it to be.